Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. My name is Adrian, and my life felt ordinary just days ago. Commutes, firm deadlines, a dependable coffee maker, and the companionable quiet of a 21-year marriage to Corey in our home in Chicago. We had our private jokes, the well-earned pride of raising a good son, and the steady rhythm of a family that had learned to coexist with love and habit. Yet for months, a tight cold not lived in my stomach. Our small disagreements lingered longer than they should have. Corey stared through me as if I were a shadow walking past a window. When I asked what was wrong, he would swipe his phone screen and say, "You are overthinking, Adrian," in that flat voice that gave me nothing back. I did not expect the evening that split my life in two. Corey dressed like a wealthy black London businessman. Ink-dark suit, immaculate shirt, polished Oxfords, a slim coat draped just so. He adjusted his cufflinks without looking at me and said, "My lover is picking me up tonight. I will sleep with her. Then I will come back and sleep with you." He left. No pause. No flinch. For hours later, his lover called my phone. The voice was a whisper of panic I did not recognize. She said, "Ma'am, please help me. I cannot explain. You should see this." I drove without thinking, the highway lights blurring into lines of yellow and white. What I saw shocked me to the core. But that was not the end. That was where karma began its slow turn, where consequences stirred even before I understood what had already been set in motion. I would not know that until much later. The next morning, as if nothing had happened, Corey moved around our bedroom in a well-cut navy jacket and a charcoal scarf, formal and tailored like a London banker on a crisp morning. I tried to touch his arm. He stepped away. When I asked where he had been, he smirked and shrugged. I swallowed it. I stored the hurt like a stone. Our son Isaiah, 22, had been home the previous weekend with his girlfriend Maya. He had proposed. He could not stop smiling. He described a city-wide scavenger hunt that ended beneath a vaulted greenhouse in Lincoln Park. His joy had been bright enough to warm the whole house. I thought of that light as Corey poured coffee with his sleeve perfectly pressed and his eyes perfectly cold. My sister Janine worked with me at our engineering firm downtown. She ran finance and I managed projects. She had always dressed like a careful executive, sleek wool coat, neat pleated trousers, a fine roll neck, and a single gold chain. Formal, refined, never loud. I used to tell her she looked like a black London creative director on a magazine cover. She would laugh and say good tailoring can make any day look better. That day, I arrived at the office feeling brittle and sleep-starved. My assistant, Russell, noticed immediately. He wore his usual clean, formal look, sharp blazer, crisp shirt, pocket square, humble elegance that said he took dignity seriously. He asked if I was all right, and I told him about Corey's distance, his words, and the quiet I could not fill. Russell's face hardened. He had worked with me for 10 years, through late nights and winter storms and projects that ate weekends. He said, "First, let us get through the Pembroke meeting." I saw early numbers. There are big issues with concrete and piping. My heart dropped. Finance had not warned me. Janine entered my office with a bright, careful smile. She had a camel coat folded over one arm, leather gloves tucked into one pocket. When I asked about the overruns, she flicked a manicured hand. She said, "Minor overages. We will handle that in the room." The meeting room was a lake of glass and polished metal. It became a furnace within minutes. Preston, the Pembroke chief executive officer, cut me off mid-sentence. He said the concrete and pipe budget was exploding in the northeast quadrant. I glanced at Janine. She looked concerned but not surprised. I said the last signed numbers had been within limits. Preston said he had already approved over $200,000 in additional material in the past 3 months. The table went silent. When I suggested a sidebar, our boss, Mr. Whitaker, followed us out. Janine handed him a thick folder I had never seen. He opened it with a slow, precise fury I had only ever seen in judges. He said the payments had been routed to a bank account in my name. Janine kept her eyes lowered, her hair wrapped in a sleek scarf that made her look like an icon and a stranger at the same time. I told them I had never seen those requisitions. Mr. Whitaker's voice sharpened. He asked if I was really going to stick to that story. Human Resources joined us. They asked for my badge. Russell was fired moments later for proximity and potential collusion. He stared at me as if I had pulled the floor out from under him. Outside, the winter air cut straight through my coat. Russell faced me beside his car, his jaw trembling with anger. He said he had seen my signature on documents. He said I had ruined his job and his son's security. His voice rose, then broke. He called me a thief. I reached for him. He stepped back, looked at me with something worse than contempt, and drove away. I went home. Corey was waiting in our living room in a slate suit and black turtleneck, the picture of restrained wealth. He looked me up and down and called me the thieving wife. He joked about me going to jail. The language he used sliced me open. There are some cuts that do not bleed until later. Over the following days, I tried to reconcile numbers, dates, signatures, anything that would prove a pattern I knew in my bones was not mine. Corey seemed amused. Then a stranger in a cheap suit delivered a thick envelope. Divorce papers. Corey laughed that harsh laugh again. He said he had been seeing someone for months. He said she was everything I was not. I stared at his face and saw, as if a veil had been ripped away, a person who wanted me to vanish. He leaned close and said, "Make it easy for me. Sign. I will take the house and most of what remains." He said if I complained, he would call the police. He said his lover had her own money. He licked his thumb, smoothed nothing, and smiled. My phone rang. It was Isaiah. When I answered, his voice was cold and flat. He said his father and his Aunt Janine had told him everything. He accused me of sleeping with my assistant and stealing from the firm. He told me I was on the local site. He said the police were looking for me. He told me not to come to his wedding. He said I was dead to him. I dropped to the floor after he hung up, and the house felt suddenly empty of oxygen. The police arrested me 2 days later and questioned me about the alleged fraud. They showed me sheets of paper with my signature and my authorization code. I stared until my eyes went dry. They released me and told me not to leave town. I went home and sat without moving as dusk slid into night. I have never been that alone in my own living room. The next morning, I received a restraining order barring me from contacting Corey, Isaiah, or Janine and demanding that I vacate my own house by Monday. Something broke in me. I texted Janine. I called her a snake. I said I would destroy her and him. The detectives came back to scold me. One of them parked across the street afterward. In a quiet bedroom that no longer felt like mine, I wrote 3 letters. The first to Corey was raw enough to sting my hands as I wrote. The second to Isaiah mixed grief, anger, and a plea that he learned to love Maya and raise a good life even if he chose to despise me. The third to Russell began with an apology and ended with a request for forgiveness I did not think I deserved. I left a note for the detectives that said they should investigate Janine's finances. Then, in a fog of despair, I made a ruinous choice. The details are simple and awful, and for a while there was only quiet. The world became a tunnel. The ceiling went soft. The floor folded. The person who saved my life, along with a neighbor who had seen too much stillness, was Detective Harris. He found me in time. The house became a scene. The paramedics lifted me into a square of light. The letters lay where I had placed them. The bed frame gleamed where I had insisted on a certain finish years ago, and it felt like a farewell to a person I could no longer recognize. I woke 3 days later to the hum of machines, a private hospital room in downtown Chicago, and a nurse adjusting an intravenous line with careful fingers. She pointed to a chair in the corner. Russell was asleep there, his head crooked against the wall, his blazer draped neatly over the chair back like someone mindful of form even when the world is collapsing. When I whispered his name, he startled awake and moved to my side. He took my hand and asked what I had been thinking. I told him that I had not been thinking at all, that I had felt trapped by his anger, by my son's condemnation, by Corey's command that I should go die in a hole. Russell's mouth trembled. He said he had been wrong to condemn me. He said he could not forgive himself for the things he had said. A doctor checked my bandages and my vitals, cheerful in that firm, practical way that keeps people alive. He told me to rest. He told me the detective wanted to speak to me. He told me I would feel weaker than I imagined for a while. Russell did not let go of my hand, even when the doctor gently nudged his elbow to get to my fore. Detective Harris entered later, a large man with quiet steadiness and an air of someone who keeps his promises. He said he had been assigned to my case, and that some things did not add up. He asked if I was willing to be interviewed again. Russell lifted his chin and said I needed a lawyer. Harris nodded and said, "Absolutely. Yes." Russell's cousin, attorney Carlton Reed, arrived the next day. He was smooth and exact, in a dark suit with a single tie clip and old-school cufflinks that caught the light. He listened. He asked smart questions. He said he knew Detective Harris and trusted him. He asked what I wanted from the divorce. I said I wanted to take back as much as I could. I said I wanted to expose what had been done to me. Carlton explained what he already suspected, that Corey and Janine had manipulated paperwork, opened accounts in my name, and moved funds as if I had authorized them. He said greed had tripped them. He told me my accounts were frozen, including the fraudulent one in my name. He told me he had requested surveillance from the bank where new accounts were opened. In the hospital, Russell visited daily. He brought me a paperback I used to love and a roast beef sandwich from a deli he knew would not ruin a fragile appetite. He wore a wool topcoat and neat trousers each day, not as a performance, but as a private promise. You will be treated with dignity while you heal. When Carlton accompanied an officer to retrieve my belongings from my house, they found Corey and Janine living together. The officer ensured they did not interfere with the court order. When Russell told me this, my throat went tight. He asked me never to harm myself again. I promised, with bandaged hands up where he could see, that I would not. After I was discharged, Russell drove me to his place. His home was modest and immaculate, a 2-story with a small yard and a view that caught the best light at noon. He told me I could have the guest room until I found a new plan. He made tea for us, poured it into porcelain cups like this gesture mattered, like beauty should not disappear just because life had been ugly. That afternoon, Carlton sat at Russell's dining table with files, a laptop, and a low voice that sounded like justice getting to its feet. He had already filed for emergency relief in divorce court, sought orders preserving property, and reached out to the district attorney. He believed warrants for Corey and Janine were likely within days. Russell's son, Bryson, arrived home from school and sketched me a get-well-soon hospital scene with stick figures and a giant sun. He wore a miniature version of his father's neatness, collared shirt, sweater vest, hair parted and brushed. He called me Miss Adrian and asked if I liked superheroes. I told him I did. He smiled as if that were an important alliance. I turned on my phone for the first time. There were messages from Corey and Janine, alternating taunts and demands that I sign divorce papers. My former firm had called as well, asking me to get in touch. There was nothing from Isaiah. Silence can be louder than a shout. A formal interview with Detective Harris and Attorney Carlton followed at the precinct the next morning. I told them everything in order: Corey's declarations, Janine's folder, the meeting, the signatures I had never seen, the restraining order, the despair. I did not hide the attempt. I did not dramatize it. I held out my bandaged wrists and said, "This is what their lies did to me." That evening, all charges against me were dropped publicly. The local news reported that Corey and Janine were wanted for fraud and identity theft. By late night, they had vanished. The next day, Isaiah called. I did not answer. The day after, he texted repeatedly. I did not respond. My heart was a hive of wounded things that needed quiet. The nightmares began. I woke screaming, and Russell rushed into the room with Bryson at his heels, sleepy and frightened. Russell sat beside me. Bryson pressed his warm hand against my arm and said, "It is all right, Miss Adrian. We are here." It broke me open in a different way, that small voice. The morning after, Russell asked if we could talk. I told him I would find a hotel, so Bryson would not be startled awake again by my cries. He went wide-eyed and grabbed my hands. He said, "No, that is not what I wanted to talk about. It is the opposite." He took a long breath. He said, "I am in love with you." I blinked. He repeated it softer. He said he had been for a long time. He said he had tried to be professional, to be invisible about it. He said he could not bear the thought of my leaving this world without knowing what he carried for me. He was dressed simply and formally, white shirt, navy trousers, a neat knit tie, and he had never looked braver. I told him I did not know what to do with tenderness when my body still felt like a field after a fire. He said he would not pressure me. He said he would be exactly what I needed: friend, anchor, witness. He said he would help me rebuild whether or not I ever felt anything for him. His voice did not shake when he said it. I kissed him. It was not dramatic. It was the quietest possible promise. It was a step away from the ruins toward something I had not believed I deserved. Later, when we slept, I dreamed that Corey and Janine mocked me again, but Russell walked in, and the dream turned like a page. Weeks passed. Corey and Janine were arrested near Detroit while trying to cross into Canada. It took time to extradite them back to Chicago. Meanwhile, Russell and I moved as one: grocery lists, therapy appointments, court dates, ordinary dinners that felt like truce and sanctuary. I wore neat coats and tailored dresses again, small armor against the memory of Ash. In court, Corey avoided my eyes. He looked smaller than I remembered. Janine stared at me without flinching. The evidence was meticulous. Bank cameras, signatures traced by forensic analysts, messages between them discussing routes and timelines. The judge's voice was measured, emphatic. Sentences were handed down. Corey, 15 years. Janine, 20, plus 5 for the cruelty and the harm done to a family member. Our divorce was granted after the verdict. Carlton negotiated the division of assets. We agreed to sell the house and split the proceeds. By legal order, I was appointed to manage Corey's funds in trust, invest them conservatively, and preserve their value until his release. It was a mercy I offered for Isaiah's sake, a conclusion I reached through therapy and through Russell's steady presence rather than through my anger. Janine's attorney asked if I would meet her for 1 hour before she was taken to jail. I agreed, my stomach wrapped in knots. In a sterile room with a table and 2 chairs, Janine kept her head down. She wore a plain jumpsuit. The person I had grown up with was there beneath the wreckage. She looked up finally and said she was sorry. She said she had loved me, but had lost herself to resentment and to Corey's manipulation. She admitted the plan and the lies. She said they needed me shattered for the scheme to work. She did not ask me for forgiveness, but she said she would serve her term without appeal. She asked to see my hands. I turned them, palms up, scars faintly visible where bandages had recently been. She gasped and covered her face. She said she would never forgive herself for those lines. She said she had always felt I outshone her, and that what she did arose from an emptiness she had refused to acknowledge. When she asked about Russell, I nodded. She said she could see that he loved me, that he had for years. She said she hoped he would heal me as best he could. I told her I did not know what I would do with all that feeling, but that I would try to build something sturdy out of what remained. I left the room. I saw Russell waiting in the public gallery, handsome in a black suit and a muted tie, a quiet beacon. He asked if I was all right. I said I was surprised by Janine's remorse, that I felt fury and pity and relief tangled in equal measure. He took my hand, and I let the warmth of his palm be an answer. He told me Isaiah was across the street at a cafe with Maya, and that they wanted to see me. He said he would stay beside me and intervene if the conversation hurt me. He called himself a Papa Bear with a small smile that broke the tension of my jaw and let me breathe. Inside the cafe, Isaiah stood when I walked in. He looked like Corey around the eyes and like me around the mouth. He wore a formal coat and a narrow scarf, like a young London professional on a December street. He tried to smile but failed. I opened my arms. He collapsed into me and cried, saying he was sorry again and again. We sat. I told him I had spoken to his Aunt Janine. He nodded. He said he had heard. He said he had believed his father and Janine because they had seemed so sure, because their story appeared to fit each ugly piece. He looked at Russell and said, "Thank you for being there for me." I told Isaiah that what hurt most was that he had not asked me if I was innocent. He said he knew. He said he would carry the shame of that omission for the rest of his life. Maya reached for my hand and said she had doubted the messages Russell left when I was in the hospital, thinking they were part of a manipulation. She said she was wrong. I showed Isaiah my scars. I told him I had made a terrible choice when I felt I had none left. I told him I was alive because a detective and a neighbor refused to let me disappear. He covered his face and wept. Russell wrapped his arm around my shoulders. We spoke for hours. It did not fix everything, but a door opened. Over months, Isaiah and I rebuilt. We sat in counseling together with a therapist who asked hard questions and insisted on honest answers. One session was devoted entirely to whether Isaiah should cut his father out of his life completely. I asked him not to. Corey was still his father. He was paying a price. Isaiah agreed to visit him if I would go with him the first time. That prison meeting was a stark room with a buzzing light, a guard at a door, and a table that remembered too many conversations like ours. Corey looked at me once, then watched Isaiah as if memorizing the shape of his profile. We did not talk about it much afterward, but a letter arrived a week later. Corey thanked me for encouraging Isaiah to visit. When life steadied, I proposed to Russell over a family dinner. I did not want to delay gratitude. Bryson called out, "Finally," and everyone laughed. Russell went pale in surprise, then radiant with joy. He wore a dark suit and shined shoes that gleamed like a celebration. He said yes. He whispered that I had saved him as much as he had saved me. Isaiah and Maya married with my blessing. I walked Isaiah down the aisle, though Russell had asked Corey's permission to stand in as father of the groom. Corey agreed through tears. Russell wore a tailored tuxedo with silk lapels, formal and beautiful, and carried himself with a gentleness that steadied my knees. Bryson was the ring bearer and told anyone who would listen that he now had 2 mothers. Carlton closed our wrongful termination case against my old firm with a substantial settlement. High 6 figures for Russell, 7 for me. Mr. Whitaker retired. The company sold for less than it once would have. We used our money to start a consulting firm, administrative and engineering services, and hired 5 employees within 6 months. Preston from Pembroke took us to dinner to apologize for not seeing sooner what had been done. He wore a well-cut jacket and ate slowly, as if tasting the remorse itself. He gave us work and introduced us to other clients. He admitted he had nearly lost the Northeast Quadrant without our guidance. He promised to vet his approvals more carefully forever after. We sold Russell's small house and bought a 5-bedroom with a view of the skyline. It needed love. We gave it that. Every door restored, every banister polished, every room dressed like a black London townhouse with American heart. Framed photographs, deep bookshelves, wool rugs, formal dining that invited laughter instead of hush. Sometimes I still had nightmares. Russell learned to sit up fast, to turn on the lamp, to hand me water, to say my name like it was a steadying handrail in the dark. The bad dreams tapered with therapy, with work, with the daily practice of joy. Bryson's school concerts, Isaiah and Maya's baby shower. Slow walks along the lake in structured coats and warm scarves. Years passed. Isaiah and Maya had a son, then a daughter. On a summer Saturday, the family gathered on our terrace overlooking the city. Bryson and little Byron, the son Russell and I had together, played video games. Our granddaughter tried to take the controller and laughed like bells. We ate barbecue and passed around lemonade in tall glasses. Isaiah mentioned a letter from Corey. He said that Janine had been released recently and had visited Corey. He said it did not go well. I called Detective Harris, who by then had become a friend and the head of a major crimes unit. He confirmed that Janine had moved to Phoenix for work and had told her probation officer that her life had been ruined by her own choices. That night, I woke from the first nightmare in years, drenched in fear, my heart pounding like a fist on a locked door. Russell called our therapist, who answered gently at 2 a.m. and talked us through the surge. She said the news of Janine's release had pressed an old bruise. She advised a session the next week. We checked on Byron. He slept through the storm as children often do. Bryson woke briefly and nodded when told everything was all right. Russell returned to bed and folded himself around me like a shelter. He asked if I thought Janine would be a problem. I said no, that I believed she would disappear into her own choices, and that if not, our security systems and our strength would meet her where she stood. My gratitude for Russell grew deeper in the quiet. He loved me without spectacle. He dressed beautifully as if to insist that every day deserved ceremony. He taught me that formal does not mean rigid. He taught me that gentle does not mean weak. He taught me that showing up, day after day, is its own kind of armor. When Isaiah came by the next week, we sat on the front steps in fitted coats despite the mild weather. Old habit more than necessity. He asked if I wanted to write a letter to Corey together. I said yes. We wrote about the wedding photos he keeps taped to his cell wall, about the grandchildren's milestones, about the way Isaiah now understood love as work, not just as feeling. We mailed the letter in an envelope with a heavy flap that closed like a sigh. On the way home, Russell took my hand at a crosswalk and kissed my knuckles as if we were in a black and white film and he a gentleman with unshakable manners. I laughed and told him he was absurd. He said he was exactly the right amount of absurd. Our firm won bigger contracts. Russell oversaw operations with a steady mind. I led project teams with the kind of patience one only earns after nearly losing everything. We hired interns from local universities and insisted they learn both technical strength and professional grace. The handshake, the thank you note, the tailored jacket, the calm in a storm. In quiet moments, I still thought of Janine in that interview room. I wondered who she had been before she believed she had to compete with me to have enough. I honored the part of me that wanted to hate her forever. I also honored the part that understood shame and the human wish to rewind a disaster until the first bad decision unspools. I did not send advice to anyone after what I lived through. Advice can be a knife disguised as a flower. Instead, I practiced notice. Russell's tea on the nightstand, Bryson's homework neatly lined, Isaiah's voice clearing when he is about to ask for help, Maya's hand resting on her stomach when she laughs, Byron's habit of straightening his tiny blazer before school as if he were the custodian of his own dignity. One evening, on our balcony, the skyline jeweled against the dark, Russell told me he had never believed he would be this happy again after his first marriage ended badly and left him with a son and a fear of trusting anyone. He said I had taught him that trust can be a daily choice, not a single leap. I told him he had taught me that rescue is not weakness. It is cooperation with grace. When Corey wrote Isaiah that he was applying to a vocational program inside, Isaiah shared the news with me. I sent Corey a brief note saying I hoped he would learn something he could carry into the life that waited. I did not promise anything I could not give. I did not plant hope I could not water. I sent a small postcard with a painting of the lake at dusk. The day our granddaughter took her first steps across our dining room, Maya almost cried. We all clapped. Russell grabbed our camera, but forgot it was out of battery and laughed at himself. He had been wearing a crisp white shirt and a waistcoat, and by the end of the evening he had flour on his sleeves from the pie he rolled out like a patient craftsman. On a Sunday in late autumn, I walked alone down Michigan Avenue in a long, structured coat and leather gloves, the wind lifting my hem slightly at each corner. I paused at a shop window that displayed midnight suits and dove-gray dresses. Reflections layered in the glass, mine, a passerby's, the mannequins. All of us dressed as if to insist that the world deserves our best selves even when it does not return the favor. I went home to the smell of roasted chicken and rosemary. Russell moved around the kitchen with a practiced ease, Bryson setting the table with clean lines, Byron placing napkins with more care than any 8-year-old ought to. I smiled and told them everything looked beautiful. Russell said, "It is not the silverware. It is the people." We ate. We talked about a new project in Milwaukee, a potential hire from Howard University, Bryson's upcoming math meet, and Byron's essay on bridges. Later, when the boys went upstairs, Russell turned to me and said he loved me in a voice that made the word feel new again. There was no grand ending to any of it, just the continuation of a life that had almost been erased, dressed each day with intention and care, like a well-tailored coat over a steady heart. There are still doors I do not open in memory and questions I do not ask. But I live, and the living is full. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.